You don't learn anything from books. Don't misunderstand me. That doesn't mean don't read them. But in our view, in this kind of performance world that I live in, learning is the development of new competence, right? And in the rest of the world, we tend to think of learning as gaining new insights, information, ideas, models, theories, beliefs for the sake of understanding, because we think understanding is the holy grail. And in my performance world, understanding is kind of the booby prize. It doesn't matter what you understand. What matters is what can you do.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. So what if I told you that one person's work has generated over $4 billion in documented value for organizations like Microsoft, AT&T, and the U.S. Special Forces? And what if the same person can show you how to apply those principles to transform your own life and work? On today's episode, we're diving deep with Chris Majer, founder of the Human Potential Project and author of The Power to Transform: A New Future Awaits. We're going to be chatting all about his journey, all about some writing tips, and pretty much the strategies that turn knowledge into impact and potential into performance. So without further ado, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Of course, I'm looking forward to this. You have quite the experience under your belt, and I think we can learn a ton from you. But before we talk about the book, I think it's important for us to touch upon that experience of yours. I mean, from competitive rugby to special forces to working with Fortune 500 companies. What's the connecting thread between all of these things, and how did that lead to writing your book?
Well, let's go back in time. So, the early 80s. I'm a competitive rugby player. I'm kind of getting to the point where I might have to hang it up. I'm starting to turn 30. There used to be a big tournament every year down in Monterey, California. And we're flying down from Seattle, and I get to the airport. And rats, the book that I was reading, I'd left on the bedside table. So I got to get a new book, right? So what do? No surprise. Go to the airport bookstore. Well, you've been in the airport bookstore. You know what they look like, right? Well, strange as this is going to sound, I had a mystical experience in the airport bookstore, which is not the normal place these things happen, right? I'm looking at the wall of books, and yeah, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but one of them starts talking to me,
Oh,
and it's not an audio book. It's literally talking inside my set, and I'm kind of looking around, going, "What's going on here?" And so, not shockingly, I went and grabbed this book and read it, and it was called The Ultimate Athlete by a guy I'd never heard of named George Leonard. And so I took it on the plane thinking, oh, I'll pick up some tips and techniques, for the tournament this week. Nope. He was talking about all sorts of things I'd never heard of: synchronicity, intentionality, some Japanese energy called ki, some guy in his black belt test, and all this cool stuff. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I really understand this, but I like it. I resonated with it somehow. And that set me on a completely different life course. Um, I'd always been interested in the phenomenon of human performance. So I took up the study of Aikido when I quit playing rugby. I met a guy there who was a sports psychologist. And he was fascinating to me because he could explain experiences that I had had and written off as too many bangs on the head or flashbacks to the 60s. And we got to talking, and we were just young and naive enough to not know it was probably not a good idea. So we started a company. And the company had one mission. We wanted to work exclusively with athletes to see what we could do to enhance their performance on the field by doing off-field work. And we basically took the old Greek model of mind, body, and spirit, brought what was then contemporary technology to it, and went to work. We had great success with our first batch of clients who were all individual performers. There's golfers and bodybuilders and archers and runners. And we did have one fundamental problem, which is that in those days, Nike and Adidas didn't exist the way that they do today. So all of our clients were amateurs, which meant they were broke. So
Mm.
doing great work, not getting paid, flaw in the business plan. So we turned our attention to teams, saw the same thing you've seen, probably participated in, which is we could take a group of individual players whose individuals were great, put them together on a team, and the team would stink. You know, well, that makes no sense. But it happens often enough that there's something to learn here. So in 1984, we coined the team word team cohesion and added mind body team, did work with a lot of national teams, Olympic teams, professional teams. And that work, surprisingly and unexpectedly for us, caught the attention of the Army. So we found ourselves down at scenic Fort Hood, Texas, where we did a program down there. That was so successful, it caught the attention of the Special Forces. And we went through a long process, but ended up doing a year-long classified project with the Special Forces where we had a programmatic blank check to push the boundaries of human performance. We had two A-teams under our operational control 24 hours a day for 6 months. And we set all sorts of records with them. At the end of that, I said to my guys, you know, we've been fortunate. We've had an opportunity to develop a body of work that's proven very effective in two arenas where performance matters and where you can measure it. First with athletes, then with soldiers. I don't want to spend my whole career training soldiers. Now, don't get me wrong, the work of doing with the soldiers was terrific, best stuff we ever did. The process of getting to do it was daunting, and I didn't feel like hiring 5 guys to do contract compliance. So I said to my team, we're going to turn our attention to business. This is a different game, and in many ways, it's going to be more challenging. And they all looked at me like I was nuts. I said, I don't mean physically, but think about it. In business, there's no timeout, there's no spring training, there's no stand down. By our standards, they don't do any real training. And on any given team, there's a vast gap in the level of competence and commitment on the part of the players. How do we work in that arena? We built out a corporate program, tested it on a little subcontractor of Boeing's, and only way I can explain it is Providence was looking out for me in those days. My second client was AT&T.
Okay.
Yeah, I went from obscure to centering in the circus, right? We went from 5 guys to 85 guys in 6 months. And as I tell everybody, I made all the stupid mistakes you could make in trying to grow a company, and it somehow seems to have succeeded despite my best efforts. So that's a long answer to a simple question, but how all that stuff strings together is that thread of performance, right?
Yeah.
And our interest in the people who are on the edge wanting to really push the boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always like asking these questions because it's so important for us to understand where authors come from, right? And what shaped those experiences to lead to the content that gets put on the page. And clearly you have a wealth of it, and you're just consistently growing, which I think is so inspirational. And a lot of people can learn from that. Um, Especially because the fact that a lot of people can be fearful of these kinds of changes. They don't know what's to come. They're nervous it might not work out, but you embraced it. And in your book, that's exactly what you kind of
Mhm.
advocate for. The fear disguises itself as a rational excuse. So that's really powerful, I think. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Well, yeah. It's a funny thing. If you ask people, they're all in favor of change. Everybody's in favor of change. Organizations are in favor of change. Individuals. And then there's in parentheses, as long as it doesn't mean me and it doesn't mean now. So, bearing that in mind, if we look at the way we are constructed as human beings, right? So, you've got a mind, which we're going to separate as distinct from your spirit or consciousness. You've got a mind, and your mind is dedicated to looking good, playing it safe, and being right. And it will go through all sorts of gyrations to do that. So when you suggest to it that you want to look at this course or maybe read this book or something, the first thing it does is poo-poo it. Oh, what's wrong with you? What are you doing that? Come on, don't, that stuff never works. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's going on there is your mind doesn't actually like the notion of change. It's going to be your biggest enemy as you go through the process. And so what we do is kind of point to that, illuminate it, give you a heads up on what it's going to dish up for you. And then with that awareness, in theory, you can keep moving forward and just go, oh, I remember he said that was going to happen. And no, there it is. Oh, I'm too busy. I'm too old. All your excuses start up and everything. But it's really just fear masquerading as prudence. Well, now's not the right time. Maybe 6 months from now it'd be better. All that stuff. And what you have to get people to understand is that's normal. Don't take it seriously. And you just got to be really clear about what you're committed to. Are you more committed to listening to that drivel or making the changes in your life? And that's what you got to true to.
Right, I like that. So you recommend just kind of like analyzing, okay, where do my priorities lie? Where is my commitment? And then going from there basically is at the core of it.
Well, yeah. And if you look at, commitment in our world is simply doing whatever it takes, parentheses, inside the guidelines of the game to get the desired result, right?
Mm.
And people always say, well, I'm not sure what I'm committed to. I say, oh, well, if you want to know, just look around. Look at what you've created. That's what you're committed to. Because you see all the time people, well, I'm committed to losing 20 pounds. No, you're not. You're committed to talking about it. But that's not the same thing as actually engaging in the process of doing it. So
Right.
you just be aware of that gap.
Understood. Right. And speaking of kind of watching, seeing, observing, like you just mentioned. I mean, you mentioned you're a new observer yourself. And so I guess you can train others the same way, train people to see differently. Based on what you were just saying, at least. Is there specific steps for doing that, for seeing this perspective differently?
Yes, actually there is. And they seem simple or simplistic, and to some extent they are, but it's in building these little tiny steps on top of each other that you get there. So
Mm.
basically what you're talking about doing is expanding your awareness. So you can do a simple little exercise, which is go out in your yard and look at a tree, right? So you go, oh yeah, okay, got it, that's a tree. But no, really spend some time looking at it. Note 5 or 6 things that you didn't normally see about it, right? Now note 5 or 6 more, because now you've got to really pay a different level of attention to it. And your head, your mind will go, oh God, this is boring. Do it anyway. And just keep doing that. Look at, any object, anything in your life, and pay attention to it in a way you've never done before. And you'll begin to see something different emerge every single time. And doing that over time drives that capacity for expansion of your awareness. And that's what it takes.
Of course. Okay. Yeah, I like those tips a lot. I'm sure they're really explained in more detail in the book as well. So I'm sure
Hmm.
if you wanted to learn more, they can, head right to the book, flip through, and get to know that in more extensive detail. That's great. But speaking of the book itself, I think it's important that we transition a little bit into the writing
Sure.
process itself. You said that it originally was 90 days to a new you and it evolved into a new future awaits. Is that true?
Mhm. Yeah, the second edition, we went to a different
Hmm.
subject.
Understood. Okay, so what did that involve exactly?
Which part of it? The
You
new
said
title
it's a new
or the
edition.
second edition?
Was there any important changes from one?
Yeah, the second edition, I was working with a different publisher, and he gave me an editor who helped us trim down some of the big stuff in the beginning, and we slimmed the book down a little bit. Uh, I'm constantly accused of overshooting my audience, so we had to slow it down a little bit and give it a different subtitle that we thought might be more attractive. It turned out that when you tell people they have to do something for 90 days, they're like, oh, that's too long. So it's like, okay, it's a new future. You can have it if you want, but here's how you do it.
Understood. Got it. Okay, so I like that. You kind of like update it a little bit just based
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. You got to keep it current.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes with what you were talking about, meaning that people don't usually like to change. Authors don't think they want to change their books because, it's out there. I don't need to change it, but why not, right? Why not update it, make it better, make it more.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And you also have a lot of exercises in there, and they really seem to create real transformation rather than just busy work. So, what's your process for doing that? How do you come up with those exercises? Is it something you practice yourself or test it on others? How does that work?
Well, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
They start out as I'll do it myself and see if it produces the result, but I'm not always a great crash tester because I'm used to this stuff. So then we'll test it out on some other people, and then we start using them in our corporate program. So when you've got hundreds and thousands of people doing these things and we get validation by results, we go, okay, that one's a keeper. But the key thing is really, everybody asks me, what took you so long to write the book? So, well, I have a challenge in that tell people about the different types of our different definitions of learning. And, as I used to say, I still do in programs, like, you don't learn anything from books. Don't misunderstand me. That doesn't mean don't read them. But in our view, in this kind of performance world that I live in, learning is the development of new competence, right? And in the rest of the world, we tend to think of learning as gaining new insights, information, ideas, models, theories, beliefs for the sake of understanding, because we think understanding is the holy grail. And in my performance world, understanding is kind of the booby prize. It doesn't matter what you understand. What matters is what can you do? So
Right.
our definition, what we're after is what we call embodied competence. Embodied means you can take some new action without having to stop, think it up, look it up in some manual. And competence is simply the capacity to consistently produce the desired result. Now, what we know is that while your mind understands, and understanding can occur in an instant, in the end, it's your body that learns. And most people don't get that. Your mind understands, but it's your body that learns. And the body only learns one way, and that's through practice. No amount of understanding ever produces competence. Only practice does. So that's why we have all these exercises in the book. They're designed to produce the competence in the new distinctions, things that are introduced in the book. Because otherwise, okay, great, I got some new ideas, but everybody's got some new ideas. So what? What matters is, can you take those and turn them into action and use that action to change your life?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like I like that you said a combination of both then, right? And kind of filtering out what works, what doesn't, and putting the best ones into the book. I
Mhm.
think that's something a lot of people can learn from because, sometimes they might just throw a couple exercises in there. They're not too intentional with it. So it's important to really do that to filter out the best ones to include to make sure it's worth your audience's time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've received a lot of, positive feedback from this from the ones who have given it a
Hmm.
try itself. Do you have an example perhaps that you'd like to share, that one that maybe resonates with
Oh,
others?
yeah, we've got thousands of
Maybe it's
examples.
hard to pick one, yeah.
Uh, most of my examples kind of come in cumulative effect. So, uh, well, let's go back to the beginning. One of when I told you about AT&T, okay?
Right.
So AT&T had just gone through divestiture. It's a little before your time, but the judge broke up the monopolistic phone company. So now they have to learn to get competitive. They spun off all these little baby bells to compete with each other, and everybody in AT&T is in a bit of a panic because they've never had to live in that world before, right? So their consumer products division before divestiture was 40,000 people. They hired McKinsey to come in and see what they could do to get the expenses down because they were losing $200 million a year. McKinsey came in, took the headcount from 40,000 to 16,000 in 9 months. Brutal. And they were very proud of themselves because lo and behold, the financial hemorrhaging had quit, and that was their mandate. They were blind to the fact that so had everything else, right? This is like an arrogant doctor crowing that the patient's quit bleeding. Well, it's because he died, you half-wit. Morale was terrible. Performance had fallen off a cliff. Um, we got called in there. How's this for a mandate to deliver what they came to call Project Miracles? The mandate, we need a miracle. We got to turn this thing around. So we put 4,000 people through an intensive 5-day program with some follow-ups. Over the next 36 months, they went from break even, because McKinsey had taken them there, to generating over 3 billion in profit for AT&T. Outside of long distance, they became the most profitable part of the business. Now, inside of that, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of personal stories. Because as we tell everybody, if you want to transform the organization, you got to start by transforming the people. That's all the organization is, right? And our work, again, is always about mind, body, spirit, and teams. And so we had people who would tell us, because we do some work on fitness, how they'd lost 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 300 pounds. Communication work, we improved our family communications, saved my marriage. we get people and do outdoor activities to give them the experience of doing something they thought was impossible. And you can see the look in people's eyes when you do this stuff, when something just changed their life. So I could go on for days about all this, and there's no shortage of examples.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's cool to know that there's so many people whose lives have been changed and impacted by it. And I guess it's a simple matter of just picking up your book and then of course, also heading to your website for resources. What is the best link for people to head to get in touch and get connected?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to the Human Potential Project, humanpotentialproject.com. Now, to be blunt about it, there's not a lot there about the book,
Oh, okay.
because that's our corporate stuff. There is a site for the book, thepowertotransform.net, where people can go. And then, of course, you can just get on Amazon and buy the book.
Understood. Okay, yeah. So the Amazon too, and then that website. We're gonna put the links in the description box of the podcast today, so everybody can go ahead and check it out and click on over. Um, I love that. So you have this book out. You have the program. What can people be excited for in the future?
Well, we're just getting ready to launch some online programs that are basically going to take the content of the book and put it into video clips. And when they buy that program, they'll get some live group coaching sessions with me or one of my senior people. And that part really seems to help a lot when you get people to do two things. One, interact with each other, and two, have a chance to bounce, what's working, what's not working off of an experienced coach.
Hmm. Okay. Well, hey, that's really exciting to hear. People can, again, go to those links. I'm assuming to kind of just stay up to date with,
Yep.
the progress on that. Then that's awesome. Um, so as we begin to sort of wrap up the conversation a little bit today, I'm curious to know if you have any sort of writing tips for the audience today. We talked a bunch about your program and your thoughts about, the how to, embrace what's in the unknown, but what about writing tips? What's something that helped you that you wish you knew when you first got into
Oh.
the writing realm?
Well, in our corporate work, I write a lot. I mean, I write white papers, I write workbooks, but I never really written a book. So in my mind, I was like, well, this can't be that much more difficult. And so I'll set out some time every morning in the office to work on the book.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that didn't work very well. Even though I'd have my door closed, people didn't seem to understand that meant don't come in here. So I was constantly getting interrupted and making no progress. I said, okay, let's try this again. So now I'm going to stay home for 2 or 3 hours every morning. First thing I do is go downstairs in my office, write on the book. And then I had to set myself some targets. You don't get to leave until you've committed X number of pages today. And I don't know about others, but for me, it was always the first few sentences of the day that were the tough ones. You got to get in the groove and get it flowing and so forth. So, um, the main challenge is setting up a structure so that you kind of almost force yourself to do the work because it'll be too easy to put it off or not take it as seriously as you really want to if you want to get it done. And then it's always get a good editor.
Right, of course. Yeah, because that's the way you have quality control and make sure that
Right.
everything is on up tip top shape, I guess you could say.
Well, that, because I'm no different than anybody else. I'd write something and go, oh, this is brilliant. And the editor would look at it and go, what in the world is this gibberish? Oh, well, maybe I'm not as brilliant as I thought. Wait a minute here. So we go back and forth and settle on something that actually was good. And that's how you do it.
Right, exactly. So that's why you need that team with you, right? You need to make
Yeah,
sure it's not just
exactly.
you, but your second set of eyes for sure.
Nobody ever did this on their own.
Right, exactly. Well, hey, I think this is really exciting stuff. I think that we have a lot to learn from your program and from your writing tips as well. So everyone can go on and click on over to that when this podcast ends. I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts to share with the audience, something I could take for them today as they continue on with their afternoons, mornings, and evenings, whatever time they might be listening today. What's something they can hold into?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think really, what is it that drives somebody to want to write a book, right? They're
Mm,
passionate about something, right? And that's the way it should be, right? So I would just encourage people to get clear about what it is that they're passionate about, put it down on paper. Don't be daunted by the fact that, it's tough going in the beginning. hang in there, and you'll end up with something that you can be proud of and, people will enjoy and get benefit from.
Understood. All right. Yeah, I love that. That's a great piece to keep people inspired throughout the day now. So, this has been a really exciting conversation. I very much appreciate you coming on today and sharing your wisdom with us.
My
If you're,
pleasure. Hope it was useful.
of course, it's a masterclass, a practical transformation. I think that anybody listening right now who's making excuses why they can't start this process, I mean, they know now there's no excuses, and your book is just
Oh,
another way to get through it. Um,
perfect.
so yeah, to all of our listeners, just stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect circumstances. As Chris has shown us, transformation begins the moment you stop making excuses and start doing the work. Your future self is waiting for you to begin, right, Chris?
Well said.
All right. So everyone, keep reading, keep inspiring, and until next time, keep building your mission. We'll see you on the next episode of the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.